Okay, okay. Good morning. Welcome everybody to this Cybersecurity 101 Back to Basics. In today's rapidly evolving digital landscape, cybersecurity is no longer optional. It's essential. This session, hosted by Armour Cybersecurity, it's designed to help strengthen your understanding of foundational security principles and best practices. So we are honored to have two distinguished speakers leading on this discussion right now today. We got David Chernitzky, CEO and founder of Armour Cybersecurity, and Arani Adhikari, Chief Strategy Officer of Armour Cybersecurity too. Together, we'll provide valuable insights into these key cybersecurity concept threats, mitigations, strategies, and how organizations can safeguard their digitals. So welcome, everyone, and let's start this fabulous webinar.
Thank you, Diego. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this morning to Armour Cybersecurity webinar. We cannot say anymore that it's the first one because we did quite a few of those in the last months. As always, we want to bring something of value and interesting to our audience, and we'll cover today the most fascinating trend that we see. We handled 4 or 5 large and significant incidents for clients around the globe, and at the end of the day, regardless of their advancement in their systems, they failed in basics. And this is why we prepared hopefully practical and interesting information how we can help you to structure approach to protecting your business, basically back to basics. And Diego already introduced us. Maybe what we will do quickly, we will just share how we can, if you look here at the screen for those who don't speak English, how you can set up your teams so you actually can get simultaneous translation from Spanish or any other language that you guys speak. Let's give a minute here, take a look at the screen. Jumping back. Yeah, okay, let's move forward. So briefly about Armour Cybersecurity. Armour Cybersecurity is a Toronto-based cyber defense company. We operating globally today. We have clients spread literally almost around all continents, more than 220 clients, industry agnostic, and we work with governments, large enterprises, and small and medium businesses as well. Everyone getting same attention, everyone getting same level of service. I bring a military experience to the table. Arani spent many years with Big Four consulting firm, and we have a lot of people in his group that coming from this background, and we are creating a practical approach that mesh this very consultative, business-oriented approach with a practical defense strategies. And what we do today. Oh, by the way, it's our new client slide. The big problem is we didn't manage to fit everyone in. We'll need to figure out how to get more real estate, but I think it's a great problem to have as a business. And this is ever expanding base of clients that happy and always referring their clients. It's the biggest compliment that we can get as a business. So maybe in a few words, Arani, if you want to take us through what we are doing, please go ahead.
Nice one, David. Guys, this is Arani. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Armour Cyber. Again, we talked about the back, what we do and how we're established. From a quick overview of our services, we're a full service shop, right? That means everything from advisory consulting, professional services, that's more implementation. We have a managed SOC. We run security operations for our clients. And last but not least, we also do forensics and incident response. Again, today's agenda is not to kind of go into the depth of our services. Again, anything related to cybersecurity, feel free to reach out to us.
Yep, thank you, Arani. And let's do a quick overview of a modern cyber landscape. And what is landscape? It's basically what is out there trying to target your business, your organization, you as an individual, and we'll give a very high level overview because you need to understand with what you're dealing with. And before we jump into depths, please ask questions in the chat as we go, and we will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. But don't ask for a lot. Last time we've been asked about lottery numbers, what are the winning lottery numbers? We don't know that. We can answer on any cyber question, but
maybe the probability of it.
Maybe probability. It's 50-50. Just buy a lottery ticket. You might win. So let's talk about modern cyber attack landscape. And what we see in the recent years, I'm talking about 5-10 years, in the last 5-10 years. If 10 years ago, cyber was predominantly problem of big organizations, that they've been big targets, and the transition to cloud started to happen. More technologies been introduced, automation, hyper connectivity. It's a new term, but it's a reality today. It is happening today at all sizes of businesses, and as a result, it creates phenomenal opportunities, unfortunately, for cyber criminals. They leverage that, and what we see as an industry, the tempo, the frequency, how many attacks and how fast they're happening, going up. And of course, we all be joking with Arani that we should not say AI at any of our webinars or podcasts, but we cannot ignore that trend. In the last 2 years, AI, generative AI, revolutionized how people work, and it's just the beginning. Unfortunately, again, cyber criminals adopting these techniques as well, and it's a phenomenal productivity tool for them. This is why frequency is going. We as a cybersecurity industry playing catch up, and this trend will continue. Ransomware is a still very popular type of attack, and it's very effective. Unfortunately, you come to your organization, all data that you use for conducting business lockdown. You cannot operate, you cannot do anything. Sometimes there is double ransomware. They ransomware you, they lock your data, and they also extorting money from clients. If you don't pay, they will leak the information. So it's still happening, and once it happens, it's very unpleasant emotion to go as a business. Data breaches, it's information stealing, be it for a money-making event where, again, they steal the data of patients, for example, in a hospital, financial information, and then they put extorting the money from the organization. Organizations that are compliant have to be compliant with certain regulations. It's unpleasant event to be at. You might cease to exist as a business as a result of such an event. And of course, phishing and social engineering, many times it's one of the most prevalent ways how to get to a target organization. And phishing and social engineering is on the rise, and will continue this trend continuing in 2025, 26, and going forward. And again, for example, AI gives phenomenal opportunities, not just to do, we all getting those emails that's, oh my God, like this has happened to me, like I'm your client, send me this information. It was 2023, 2024. Today, this AI, people getting Teams call that your client actually showing on the call and asking for money transfer. There was a huge breach in one of the banks in Hong Kong in 2024, in 16th of January. For some reason, I remember this date. CFO asked to move an employee $25 million to a different account. Employee moved it, money gone. It was not a CFO, it was a deepfake. Deepfake that looked like CFO, spoke like CFO, but it was not a real person. So phishing and social engineering will continue expand and diversify with the help of AI. Moving forward, maybe let's take a look quickly who are types of attackers that attacking us today. As if you are a bigger organization, you're building a lot of IP, many times different states that not friendly to the environment where you live at. They actually deploy state level tactics, and they have groups that operating under the wing of government that deliberately going and breaking into organization to shorten the R&D cycles to gain access, competitive advantage. We will not talk about geopolitics here, but we all see how unstable and interesting is the situation today in terms of a lot of moving parts, a lot of new players coming in, and it's a power struggle going on. So state-driven attacks, you have cyber criminals. If in the past it was drug trafficking or human trafficking, to commit cybercrime is significantly easier with significantly lower chance to get caught, and it's actually very good money. Last year, 2024 ended up with 10.5 trillion in damages globally due to cyber attack activities. So organized crime, cyber terrorist. We all seen a couple of cases where cyber actually can kill human beings. And luckily, it's not happening much yet, but there are a lot of different scenarios how cyber attacks can eventually lead to human life loss, and we need to be aware of that. Activists, people don't agree with political agendas, ecological agendas. Well, you name it, it can happen. And of course, last but not least, it's individuals or insider threats that it's a very big thing that especially larger organizations need to be concerned about it. But also small guys need to be aware of that. Well, if one employee that's not happy with what's happening decides to destroy your organization, can it happen to you? You don't need to answer us. You just ask yourself that question. And we've seen a couple of cases that we've seen in our practice. It can be very unpleasant situation to be at as a business. So I think it's a high-level overview for who are the people that are attacking you. And
I think one just want to add over there is why is it important to understand this particular aspect is each of these groups have certain tactics, certain techniques, certain tools that they use, right? And as defenders, right, we need to understand who is the one who is going to target you, right? By understanding that, by understanding their modus operandi, by understanding their tools and techniques and procedures, we will be able to defend better, right? For most of the businesses, this may not be the most relevant thing for you, right? But for us as cyber defenders and more on the, the first line of the defense is for us, it's very important to understand why you will get targeted, right? And all of the attacks that we talked about, all of the, the advanced AIs and everything that we talked about. And again, you'll see in the today's webinar that we're going to unfold is it doesn't need to be that complicated, right? Or it doesn't need to be that advanced. You don't need certain large amount of money, right, in order to defend against this, right? And we'll unpack this over our webinar today.
Arani, are all the hackers having hoodie and sitting and working from dark?
Now those are organized criminals, right? Now we have call centers running as a company doing this, right? So it's no longer a paradigm of one individual threat attacker doing things. It's an organized crime. It's a money making business, right? And actually, interesting part. You might have heard about a term called heard of ransomware. There is a term called ransomware as a service. Like how you have software as a service, there is ransomware as a service, right? So in underground criminals, they actually use these sort of services, right, to deploy ransomware at organizations. Their whole and sole purpose, they don't want to profit from it. They are actually affiliate gangs who are profiting from them, right? So ransomware service is a new thing. Again, it's going on for a while. Now we're only going to see the uptick trend on them.
Yeah, thanks, Arani. Let's move on. So we want to talk about building a cyber hygiene foundation for your organization, and
maybe let's kind of start from there, right? So this is a typical corporate office that you see, right? So you have, people coming in the office, right? You have people using desktops, laptops, mobile phones, right? They're using their email, right? They're using your internet, your wireless networks, right? And doing transactions, based on your business that you're in, right? So if you're in a law firm, or if you're in professional services, you're an accounting firm or a manufacturing company, right? You are using email on a daily basis, right? You're using laptops, desktops on a daily basis. You're opening Word files, Excel files, and you're working with them on a daily basis. Now, the reason we're kind of picturizing this is, how will you get targeted? Right? When an attacker comes in the organization, and you will see those red dots, and I'm going to talk about each one of these sections quickly in our following slides. You will see how each one of these areas can get targeted. And again, the reason we are doing this exercise, and we do this exercise with a lot of organization, is to understand what kind of security controls we need to prevent that from happening, right? So as an example, the first one that we can talk about. So this is, again, on the very left side, we talk about extortion, right? Now, how does that happen, right? There are a few methods that they will actually kind of use, right? So first, we talk about business email compromise, right? So the idea will be they will compromise your email, right? They'll get access to your data, and which is very common today. And using that data, they're going to do extortion, right? They're going to release the data if you don't make the payment, right? We talked about social media engineering, right? So that includes, for example, people coming in, hacking into their social media accounts, right? Exposing secrets from your social media accounts, right? Think of it this way, right? You might have Facebook accounts, your family has Facebook accounts. A lot of times I've seen cases where they hack into personal accounts, right? And they actually send you an email back saying, hey, we have access to the pictures and everything, and we're going to release it, right, if you don't pay. Now, a lot of times these are scams, right? A lot of times, there are no, issues with those kind of pictures getting released and getting public, but there are times when people actually will have certain pictures they don't want being public, right? So again, social media compromise is something that, is often overlooked when it comes to corporate security, but it's a very real threat of extortion nowadays, right? Last but not least, credential threats. Again, it's in terms of stealing your credentials, getting access to your emails, getting access to your social media accounts, again prevalent. The whole and sole purpose over here is people are behind the data that actually goes behind that account, right? And they're going to use that for extortion venues, right? Do you talk about the fraud one?
Sure. So in terms of fraud, and by the way, maybe before we jump into a fraud, we're showing the office because it's regardless what kind of business you're running. Be you a manufacturing business, you have an office. Yes, you have also manufacturing floor. If you're a legal office, you have an office. But what we and so on and so forth. Of course, there are so many different verticals of business that we meet our clients at. But what we see more, it's not just an office as a physical space. Some organization that, especially born after a pandemic, they have a virtual office. They have people in Toronto, US, Brazil, and India. And we have, how do you manage that environment? It's everything that we talk about here. It's not just applicable if you have an office. You have a company that you're running from physical, hybrid, or totally virtual location. Everything we talk about here is applicable. And you already spoke about ransomware, like it's a real threat. How do you protect your organization? And at the end of the day, ransomware has few impacts. If your data locked, you cannot conduct your business. You totally lose your productivity. You need to ask yourself, can I lose one day of being shut down? And by the way, here's a dirty secret. If you're not well prepared for ransomware, usually complete shutdown continues 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then long recovery time takes place, sometimes 3 months. We've seen the cases where it took 18 months to get back to 100% of productivity. Can your business sustain that? Are you ready? Is it a real business? Sometimes some businesses that are very low tech, not connected to computers, yeah, it can happen, but they can still continue to operate. A lot of businesses that heavily rely on IT technologies, it's not an option today. So this is a ransomware. And of course, ransomware, the impact on you from you that can be, they ask for money that you will have to pay to release the data. most of the time it works, sometimes it's not working, so it's not guaranteed. And of course, besides monetary impact direct of lost revenue and recovery cost, some businesses cannot sustain ransomware event as an event, because if you law office and you lose your privileged attorney-client privileged information, most probably half of your clients will leave next year, if not all of them. Can your business sustain that? It's a business risk that you need to manage, of course. And of course, blackmail. Some people saying, "Hey, we will not pay this money." They can blackmail you, your family, your clients, and trust me, criminals are very creative to find how to push button of different folks. We've seen it in a different case.
A lot of cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on, espionage, right? This is again, we talked about various threats, but this is again one of the real threats nobody kind of talks about a lot, right? When there is a malicious insider, right? When you have an intellectual property in the country and in the company, and you have a malicious insider, a lot of times, like, they are paid off, right, to steal that intellectual property and give it off to your competitors, right? Now that's a clear case of espionage, right? That's basically means again spying within the company, right? Now, theft of those sensitive information, theft of the intellectual property, it's very real. We see a lot of these cases. There are a lot of easy controls. Again, we're going to talk about the controls in a few moments, but it's very easy again to protect against them, right? It's again the awareness that comes in, that a lot of companies don't realize that your people can actually do this, right? So we have dealt with some cases in the recent months, right, when the owners of the business are suspicious, right, that they are losing business to their competitors. Now, there has to be a reason why they are losing customers to their competitors, right? When we do investigations, we often find out that this data that is getting actively stolen through email, right, is as easy as sending the corporate data, sending the intellectual property, right, which might be customer databases, your code bases, etc., sending those out, right, over email to their personal Gmail account. And we see traces of that happening. Now, those are very apparent. It's easy again to detect, right? But if you get targeted by extremely advanced threat actors, right, who has the intent of espionage, it's again difficult to detect. But majority of the cases that we see, again, there'll be easy controls with which you can detect that, right? Moving on, like physical threats, again, we talk about this, particular entrance over here. The reason physical threat is becoming a real scenario nowadays is because of the term called cyber physical, right? What does that mean? A person comes into the office, right? They plug in a USB device, right, on your computer. That USB device can act as a keylogger, right? A keylogger is basically a spyware on your system that records all your keystrokes and sends it back to the hacker. Right now, that can happen. It's a very realistic scenario. These keyloggers, the hardware keyloggers, are available in the open market, right? You can buy it off Amazon nowadays, right? So it's very easy. It has become very easy to access very advanced hardware that can be used for hacking. Right now, physical compromise, again, when you talk about cybersecurity or IT security in general, physical security is not always the first thing that we think about. But again, today's webinar, we want you to think about these areas, right? People can come in, people can plug in something on your network jack, right, on your physical network port and leave, right? It's very hard to detect, right? Unless you have the right controls in place. It will be very hard to detect that one small Raspberry Pi device, right, connected to a network port, somebody's controlling from outside and hacking into the inside, right? So physical security becomes a very important aspect, given these sort of trends that we are seeing today, right? The other aspect that we talk about over here is, bugging of offices, right? Again, we deal with cases. We actually do some, the technical term is counter surveillance measures, right? But we do bug sweeps, right, of offices to detect if there are any listening devices, right, in the offices. Most often we have worked with law firms, right? Firms that deal with merger and acquisition, where the data is of immense importance. We see again those companies getting targeted by physical bugs, right? Again, not a traditional cybersecurity or IT security area. However, right, this is something that we need to be concerned on and we need to protect against.
Yeah, maybe I need to give an example here. One of the clients that we did penetration testing, and they spent a lot of effort on protecting their environment But I will not mention the city where it is here in North America. You just land in an airport, you get the Uber, you drive to their office. Phenomenal, fantastic building. You walk into the office, you're getting to the right, it's a boardroom. Boardroom has a RJ45 cable.
Not protected,
Not
glass,
protected.
right?
No one stop you, no one ask you to connect the keylogger that Arani mentioned. Game over. It's just matter of time until someone will sit in this network, take over one of your admin session. Your business is down. If this is again to give sense of physical importance of it's like you cannot build strong cybersecurity without strong foundations. Otherwise, it's like a house of cards. It will collapse.
Exactly. And I think the two strong foundation that we talk about always is IT, right? You need to have a base IT controls, right? And this physical controls. Again, today with the physicless world that we kind of talked about before, this may not be that relevant. However, if you think about it, with a physical, in a physicless world, right? In a physical office, you are everybody in the same office working out, right? In a physicless, they can be working from anywhere, right? They can be working out of a cafe, they can be working out of a co-sharing space, right? Targeting over there is much more easier than in a corporate office, right? So one can argue that in a physicless office, it becomes the physical security threats become more and more prevalent, right?
Yeah, but again, you actually triggered a good example. Many times I also work from coffee shops, but I see people work on a laptop and they step out for a second.
Screen unlocked.
Screen unlocked. Basically, you give direct access to a person. Like if someone grabs the laptop, run, and people don't realize you can grab the laptop, run from the store, you have access to everything.
Again, things will be solved with awareness. I think again, these are not advanced.
Physical is absolutely have to be in top of the mind for as a foundation for everyone. Okay, so I hope we managed to give the sense that how complicated and complex this domain. By the way, my point is always it's not a rocket science. It's just big. It's very wide. There is I think around 40 to 50 subdomains of cybersecurity that any organization that want to protect itself reasonably need to be dealt with. It need to be everything need to connect eventually at the end of the day. And there is a lot of jargons. There is a lot of 4,000 technologies built in cybersecurity. There is shortage of experts. We see a lot of organizations struggling with gaining access to people actually trained on seeing the big picture and then have enough depth to go into different domains to implement processes, controls, and technologies that will connect everything. But this complexity eventually costs organizations the breaches that we mentioned at the beginning, because it's like, oh my God, it's so complex, we don't want to deal with that. Exactly. So maybe from here we will jump and try to simplify. It's not really so scary if you're taking measured, structured approach. If you focus on basics, you'll be much better than 99% of the population. You'll make yourself less attractive targets to attackers. And I think it's a key game for a lot of people. How do you become less attractive targets?
Exactly. And as an industry, again, in cybersecurity, I think we often, we have made it complicated, right? The first line item there, in terms of the jargons, we have a lot of acronyms, right? We have a lot of abbreviations, right? We have a lot of XDR, MDR, EDR, right? SOC, right? What happens is, again, we are not the only ones to blame. I think the marketing is to blame as well. But what happens at the end is, you alienate people who don't know about it, right? If you have a non-technical person, right, a first-time IT manager, a director of finance that in a small medium business, or someone who has never dealt with cyber before in a large enterprise, right? If they don't know these terms, they often get confused when they talk to vendors, right? And vendors again are trying to sell their technologies. They're trying to sell their services. At Armour, again, we try to take a different approach. We want to sell the outcome, right? We want to kind of solve the outcome and solve your problem rather than sell a technology. But that's an industry problem, right? Again, as David mentioned, right, there are too many technologies. They're perceived as expensive, right? Again, if you have talked with us, if you're a customer in the audience, you will know that it's not that expensive, right? It doesn't need to be that expensive, right? There are some basic things that we can do, and we're going to talk about that from now. Is with which you can prevent majority of these attacks and majority of these threats that we talked about before. So without further ado, like let's talk about the security control. So over here, there will be a series of controls we're going to talk about. And as a thank you for attending the presentation, right, to this webinar, we're going to send you a guide as well for this. It's a simple guide, one pager. It will have a lot of resources which you can refer at your free time. Hopefully that helps you. These are free of cost. There's no charge to be paid. So let's talk about access control, right? You remember the office that we showed, right? Or the physicalist example that we gave. Or everything starts with access, right? You log into a computer, right, with your username password. You log into an email with your username password. When you chat with someone, or before you chat with someone, you have a username password or a phone number with which you authenticate. Protecting your identity and access is the first thing. And as we said, some of the key things that we're going to talk about: strong and unique passwords. The amount of time we have seen easy passwords go out, it's just crazy the amount of time we have seen those easy passwords happen, right? What happens with a non-complex password is easy to crack, it's easy to guess, right? Somebody can guess a password and get into your account, right? Now, password managers, right? Again, as we joke about it, Excel is the world's oldest known password manager, right? Hopefully, in the audience today, if you're using Excel after today, please don't use Excel, right? Why? Because in Excel, you have passwords written down in pretty clear text, right? That anybody can see, anybody can steal. My father uses Excel, used to use Excel before I put him on a password manager, right? Now, look, as in my family, everybody uses password managers, right? And I've mandated everybody to use that, right? Are they expensive? They're not expensive.
Even 3 years old son has password manager as well.
For his YouTube account, exactly. For his YouTube account, he has password manager. But again, the thing is, password manager is not expensive. It's a couple of bucks a month, right? It's less than your Netflix subscription, right? When it comes to super admin credentials, what do we mean by that? So if you're a IT manager in the organization, you have a Microsoft 365 account, the global admin, that's a super admin. Somebody gets access to that, it's game over. Everybody has access to everything, right? Protecting them using certain vaults. Again, password managers, they have certain vaults within which you can store these credentials. You don't have to write it down. You don't have to put it in an Excel. You don't have to share it with someone. You don't have to put it in a text file. Use password managers. And last but not the least, like it's 2025, folks, please use MFA, right? Yesterday, actually, we had a client, right, where we saw brute force attempt happening, and they were targeting users which had the single factor authentication. What that means is they just have the username and password to log in. MFA is easy to set up. It's not that complicated. Sometimes, again, it depends. It's a change, right? Sometimes it's difficult for someone. It can be solved with training. But MFA is going to protect you against most of the advanced attacks out there. We talk about phishing scams. We talk about business email compromise. We talk about ransomware. Everything starts from hacking your passwords, hacking your credentials. You can prevent that by, again, simple techniques like MFA, having complicated passwords, storing passwords in password managers. Start these 3 hygienes. You'll see a downtake in a lot of the attacks that you are defending against today.
And maybe to add one more thing on passwords, it needs to be complex. It means 12 characters at least. This is password manager will help you to deal with that.
Exactly. Right. Again, folks, don't get afraid by the fact that you need to store a 12-character password, because you can't remember so many different passwords, and don't use the same password across different sites, right? So a password manager, again, helps you with that. There are tons of password manager out on the industry, like out on the internet. Reach out to us. We'll recommend you some that we use and we see, pretty strong in their game, right? We talk about endpoint protection. Again, we talked about the access. Now let's talk about where you're working from. You're working from your laptops. You're working from your desktops, from maybe a tablet, right, on your mobile phones, right? But that's the endpoint, right? So what the technical term endpoint basically means, the device through which you're working, right? Very important again to protect the device. Say, for example, your passwords fail. Say, for example, a hacker gets access to the device, right? How do you prevent the hacker at another layer, right? You might have heard about this term, and we have talked about this in the last webinar, defense in depth, right? What that means is you have to defend at various layers and assume that one layer fails, the second layer will be able to defend itself, right? So when you talk about devices, again, we use Windows, Mac.
Rani, let's give this example. Like, think about Mission Impossible. They're trying to steal this crown jewel of their business, and
The part one.
And you have all these different lasers.
Yeah.
You need to have these sensors that one fails,
The other comes,
the other one captures it.
I think with the part one where Tom Cruise kind of goes down, right? That's the one. But again, is the layered example, right? When we talk about again devices, right, have an EDR or an antivirus, right? The difference between an antivirus and an EDR or a enhanced detect and response, it's another terminology that we use is EDR is an advanced AV, right? It's an advanced version of antivirus, right? Again, for our client segments, we say have an antivirus at minimum, right? Make sure you're patching the devices. If you have a Windows devices, they release patches from time to time. Have it on auto update. Make sure those are updated, right? Again, hackers come in again through a couple of means. One, we talked about the access, right? So hacking your username passwords through phishing emails, but they can also come through an unpatched server or an unpatched machine. Why is it unpatched? Because again, there is a patch out for a vulnerability that a hacker can exploit to get into that machine, right? Making sure it's patched, and for most of organizations, that will prevent a lot of the threats, right? In some of the recent cases that we have seen, companies getting hacked because they had an unpatched firewall or an unpatched router, right? So that's sitting on the internet, exposed to the internet, right? They got in because that software was unpatched, right? Encrypted device. So that means when your physical device, when laptop gets stolen, the example David gave, you're working on a coffee shop, right? And you went to the washroom, somebody left it unattended, somebody goes and runs with it, right? Unlock. They won't be able to access those those data because your hard drive itself will be encrypted. Again, Microsoft today provides that feature by default. All you have to do is configure it, enable it, right?
By default, it means $0 cost.
$0. You're already paying for it.
You're already paying for it.
Right?
Exactly.
So a lot of the examples that we give today, folks understand that you're already paying for these features, right? If you don't know how to configure it, ask us, we'll guide you, right? But you're already paying for all of these features from Microsoft, from Google, from Amazon, no matter where you are, right? Wireless security, right? We're working from home, we're working from offices.
Before we jump to wireless security, another aspect we see sometimes organizations allow people to use personal devices. And sometimes we've seen in the past cases that an employee used kids' computer, that kids doing gaming.
Blame it on the kids.
Blame it on the kids, but again, we're not blaming kids doing gaming here by any means, but those devices are usually not protected.
Yeah.
And if you trying to access very sensitive information, if you put your credentials, if you need to assume that once you use that device, it's a public knowledge from that point in time. And the question, how do you manage it? They're actually very effective and not expensive techniques. How do you manage? You can allow your employees to bring their own devices, be it mobile devices or laptops, but you need to implement at least minimal level of controls on those devices so you will not compromise your organization.
Exactly. And even if it is like, the thing is, there is a concept of assume breach, right? If you use those insecure devices, assume that the data that you have transacted on that device is breached, right? And we'll talk about some of those controls later on as well. But I mean, going back on a couple of other points in terms of wireless security, again, you're connecting to your home network. It's on a wireless router. It's on a wireless network. A basic thing that you can do, and most of the wireless routers come with that capability today, you can segment the network, right? Again, ask the technician how to do it, ask us how to do it, we'll guide you how to do it. The whole idea is wherever your kids connect, wherever your TVs are, right? The smart TVs on Netflix are connecting, wherever your app, the Apple Watches and the Kindles are connecting, right? Have those separated from your work machines, right? So if you have a work laptop and if you are working on your business, right, have those two segments separated, right? And why we're saying separated? Because the chances of a personal device getting hacked versus another corporate device with some of the security controls that are hopefully on them is less. right? So because you're preventing the hacker, even if they compromise the other side, they can't move on to the other area, right? The last part, VPN. Again, you might have heard about the term a lot. Tons of VPN softwares out there, inexpensive, some free. There are pros and cons of all of these VPNs. The whole purpose is to protect your communication on internet, right? If you're communicating on internet, if you're transacting on internet, especially from countries that that may not have favorable laws for electronic surveillance, you want a VPN over there, right? Because you want to protect yourself while you're traveling, right? You're traveling and you have to respond to a work email, have a VPN on. We talk about email. Maybe David, you want to talk about the email, the language of the business.
And they, like always, to trail it is a few more points on VPN. Imagine what we see in our practice, that we come into organization that they had office, but maybe they're working in a hybrid environment today. So, and they don't use VPN. So, we have firewall in our office. Yeah, but if you're in the airport traveling to your client, or you're on vacation, how exactly your firewall in your office helps you? So having modern workforce protection controls, that this technology that actually can enforce always on VPN, that your communication is encrypted regardless where you are working physically from, it's available. And again, it's less than cost today, less than Netflix.
Yeah. And whenever we say modern workforce protection, doesn't need to be very complicated. Again, these are very simple terms at the end, right? Again, ask us, we'll simplify that.
We will be happy to simplify. And of course, like jumping to email security, this is by far the most common communication channel today to any business across any industry, across any country or a continent that we work with. Everyone using email, and as a result, hackers see it as a very lucrative channel to try to get access to information that's flowing through this channel, trying to manipulate this information. And everything that we said so far, assuming you have protection, that you encrypting your channel, the layer defense, you protecting your machine. Now you're staring at the screen of Outlook or G Suite, whatever you use, guys. At the end of the day, Microsoft and Google are great companies providing some out-of-the-box tools that usually they're not turned on. They need to be configured, that can increase the layer of security in your environment. Having said that, there are some specialist companies that also providing extra layers of protection that can be implemented, that even taking it to the next level. Most of the time, especially in the smaller guys that we're walking in, they just have out-of-the-box solution that works great until the day it's not. And of course, if you look, let's say you secured your email, now you have a human element that heavily involved in interaction with the external world. People need to be trained. People need to understand what are the threats can come from phishing emails, from spam emails, from someone can for example, one of the financial institutions that we work with, they're getting a lot of input documents from clients. They cannot ensure that those clients are properly protected. Some clients are sending them malware, deliberately or not. We will not solve it here, but how do you create layers of security to understand this looks, or some people breached and they even don't know that they sent to the organization phishing email, for example, with intent to harvest credentials so your organization can get breached. You need to train people on top of technology layer, protection layer. You need to train people how to identify and deal with that.
And just one point on that today, folks, again, Microsoft, again, if you have a certain license, and we can talk about Microsoft license on a separate webinar, they actually provide you certain, phishing training from their platform, right? So again, don't think of this as another investment, another dollars out of the door, but this is, again, available through certain platforms already.
The reality today that about 90% of organizations that we walk in, they use Microsoft 365 today. And those tools are there, but they require knowledge. And Microsoft knows that maybe big organizations know how to deal with that, but majority of businesses today around the globe are small and medium enterprises. We see that statistic across different geographies. And if they will turn all these tools on, most probably business will not be flowing. So it's really extra work that need to be done. And
it's a balance.
It's a balance, exactly. And they're striking this balance. So if your IT people know how to do it, great. If you need help, we will be happy to help your IT people or your organization to balance that. And of course, there is a additional list of you need to have MFA on 100% of the accounts.
It's all employees, all devices.
Everything. It's not negotiable at these days. You need to configure, for example, DNS records. And the DNS, it's again, Ronnie, maybe we need to start a podcast and just talk about terms for acronyms for
a separate podcast
for business people. But how do you configure your mail delivery system so it actually will not go to spam to your client? Will be seen as a spam, how it will verify that whoever sending you information is authentic, and there is a lot of things. It's just key points here listed, but a lot of things need to be done. And of course, last but not least, training to employees. You need to train your people. You need to train people, show them real life scenarios, educate them. Besides education, you need to test the knowledge as well.
Perfect. Moving on, and I'm confident we are on time here. Quickly kind of cycling through it, data protection. Again, we talked about the various layers. Now, we talked about email, we talked about devices. Ultimately, you deal with data, right? Where are data? How does it need protecting? This is where we talk about it. Very simplistically saying, encrypt your devices, right? Encrypt your emails, right? If you have a USB device that you're using, if there's a media device, media storage that you're using, make sure those are encrypted. Why? Because if they get stolen, the worst case scenario of a physical one, they will still be available and they will still be able to operate, right? When it comes to the the data element, another area that we talk about, data loss prevention. You might have heard about this term. So we talked about a scenario where a user is stealing data, right? We have seen those cases. Again, today, Microsoft, Google, they have certain configurations already available to you, right? That you can use to detect those simple use cases, right? They may not be as advanced and you need some specialized tools for that, which are not that expensive. But at the same time, at the end of the day, right, you do have these tools available to you with which you can detect somebody taking sensitive confidential data out of your organization to another person.
I think this is a key, not only in this context, but for every aspect, every type of control. Most of organizations flying blind today, and getting step one is always if we're trying to generalize in security, do you know what you protect? Do you have visibility what is going with those assets that you're trying to protect? And a lot of organizations, they simply don't have this visibility.
Exactly.
And sometimes even don't know what they actually, they have very vague idea, but to have a list of exact assets,
even for large organizations. Even for large organizations, guys, again, it's not only a small, medium business sort of a problem, even for large enterprise. I've gone in there, I've seen they may not have a clean asset list or a clean data list to start with, right? So it's a problem throughout, right? But again, in a smaller context, it's easy to be dealt with than in a bigger context, right? And I know we have some questions as well. We'll get to the questions in a bit. Maybe let's quickly cycle through this.
Yeah.
When we talk about the backups, I talk about the insurance.
So, Rani, how did you know that backup is my favorite?
I know backups are favorite topic.
I'm always getting that. So backups are everyone know what is backup, but 95% of organizations that we start to work with today, they're doing it wrong. And again, reality there is that you need to create bulletproof backup. And I think we published a couple of articles on that. Please go to our website and read about it. How do you create also layered approach that eventually will allow you to withstand a next cyber attack? Imagine a situation that actually it's not imagine, like I want to give a real life example. 100% of incident response that we handled in last 6 years as a company, backups, local backups being destroyed 100% of the time. The only organization that managed to recover that they actually built something that's called 3-to-1 strategy. They had off-site backups.
Let me explain the 3-2-1. What that
You have to. Thank you. We need to start a podcast about acronyms. It's like I think we will take that action item. You need to have 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media, and one is offline. And it's not a cloud backup. Offline, it means it's disconnected from network. If someone getting to your environment, taking over credentials of your IT folks, and they have access to the Kindle, they still cannot delete backup that you stored on a separate media and locked in your bank safe or your house safe or wherever you have it, or stored it somewhere else. We've seen the only organizations that survived that they actually have multiple backups. They have layered backups on different types of media, and they had offline backup that they managed to recover.
And well tested.
And of course, thank you, Arani. This is paramount. A lot of people just doing backup, they never test it. We see an organization, they had separate backup, they tried to restore it, it didn't work because they never tested. Exactly. You have to test your backups. It's a pain in the neck, it's a lot of work. You have to do it.
And then lastly, but not least, like cyber insurance, right? Again, folks, I know a lot of folks will not be a fan of insurance. Insurance is not there, to pay out during that time, right? So they'll do everything not to pay out during an incident. But it's very important when it comes to cyber insurance. Again, folks, today we're at a time when even with some of these controls, they may not be consistent, right? We talk about MFA. You might have MFA on most of your people, but maybe those 2 people who have access to a lot of things don't have MFA on them, right? So why you might think that you have MFA on most of them, that 1% or 1 or 2% who may not have MFA will get targeted, will get hacked, right? So in those sort of scenarios, right, again, with all the protection controls, there is no guarantee that you won't be hacked, right? And that's where cyber insurance comes in. Today, again, the reality is, it's becoming difficult for organizations to get cyber insurance, or they're paying a high premium, primarily because of the amount of controls they would want them to see. Depending on which industry you're in, depending on the complexity of your business, right? Depending on how big you are, the premiums might differ, right? Where we help organizations, again, come to us for a consultation. We'll tell you what insurance generally looks out for so that you become insurable, or at least pay a lower premium than what you can do without those controls, right? So insurance today is, again, the last level is in a risk management world, we call it as a risk transfer, right? So you're transferring your risk. It's mostly on the financial impact and the financial liability that you're moving that out, right? Is insurance, like a lot of clients we have seen get cyber insurance and think they're safe. It's not the case. Cyber insurance is not going to protect you from anything, right? It's only there to protect you financially. If you get ransomware, if you get extorted, if you have to pay extortion, if you have to pay for recovery, that's the only case when cyber insurance is going to help. Right. And now with that, I think we are at the very end of the webinar, right? And we know we have some questions to answer as well. Like, again, one thing that we want to kind of keep on, harping on, the controls we talked about: access, device, data, email, backups. Do an exercise today. Go to your organization, just do a check mark on what are you doing on each of these areas. You will find most of the times you will have certain gaps in these areas. If you fix those gaps, most of the advanced attacks, right, will be stopped. And again, we are here to help folks, right, with any services, anything that you need. Even these checklists, we are going to give out a checklist for free as well, with some free links, some policies, certain things that's already available on the internet. We have compiled those for you. We'll give it out for free. Again, contact us for anything else. And I think we can take some questions.
And we will do acronyms, please.
We'll do the acronyms.
So
I will do a separate webinar and
a separate webinar on acronyms. Let's take some questions. Diego, do we have any questions?
Yeah. Okay, guys. We have a couple of minutes, so we can answer a couple of questions. The first one that we have here is, what are your thoughts on password apps to generate random passwords like Keeper Security?
Okay. So password apps, when you say password apps, I'm assuming you mean password managers. They actually help you generate various lengths and complexity of passwords. Now, I think the example you gave was Keeper. It's good. Now there are a lot of other solutions as well, right? Now, Keeper it's a good start, right? Keeper is better than not having anything, but there are other ones that you should consider, like 1Password, right? Microsoft has another password manager for Azure environments as well. You can use those as well, but between Keeper, 1Password, you're probably safe, right? There are other password managers like LastPass, for example. They have got hacked in the past multiple times. Again, as a company, they have evolved. They have strengthened their security. But again, I would suggest keeping it between, again, Keeper, 1Password, these sort of vaults, right? Try to see the architecture of the password manager, right? Keeper is a local vault, so the vault is local. And if that gets stolen, that's game over, right? In 1Password, again, the way they store the password and the way the authentication happens and the storage happens, even if they hack the company, they will not be able to access those vaults, right? So again, folks, password managers,
they can access the vault, but it will be bunch of gibberish.
They
cannot see it,
right? So while Keeper is a good start, absolutely, right? But there are other solutions in the market as well. Do your research, reach out to us. We'll give you some pros and cons of the password manager that we have seen and we recommend to the market. There you go.
Okay, perfect. We have one more question. It's what role does cybersecurity awareness training play in preventing cyber attacks?
So it's my favorite question. Thanks for asking that. Many times I'm comparing it to military training, and think about military many times dealing with death and life situations. And this is why infantry soldiers trained on certain situations. So whenever it happens, they will not stand tall and freeze. So they will get shot and die. Eventually, you train soldiers on different scenarios and in different reaction tactics. Cyber awareness training, no different. Of course, the difference, it's not a kinetic warfare. We live in a reality that cyber warfare is waging. There are organizations getting attacked. How do you train people to identify threat, how to deal with threat, basically what to do, and many times what not to do, how to report it to professionals inside of the organization. And training itself is important, but testing, like periodic testing, and sometimes you're doing testing that you say, hey, now we'll do the test. Sometimes you're doing tests that you not tell employees, and you want to catch undesired behavior as yourself, rather than hacker will catch this opportunity to manipulate the person to do something that will lead to a crack opening to your organization. So it can lead to ransomware, data breach, and so on and so forth, like we discussed.
And not only it's not their fault. It's not a fault finding exercise, right? You need to understand that people inherently are trusting, right? They are not trained to behave in a secure manner, right? Inherently, people will trust. That's just human nature, right? But when you're working in a certain setting, when you're working in a certain environment where the threat index is high, right? We need to ensure they are aware of certain things to the best of their ability, right? Again, we call this layered defense, right? Yeah. It starts from your access, your data, your device, your emails, lastly with the people, right? You need to train the people. We talked about people training, but just to make them, they know what to look out for, right? Again, you can't change human nature easily, but it's as much as we can train them, right? So that means the training doesn't need to be done once a year just to check the box. It needs to be continuous. It needs to be done on a continuous basis.
And we train today dozens and dozens of organizations. We have a dedicated staff that deals with that. And what we see, we usually like to do the baseline test. And you see people clicking on emails that we as a professionals scratching always my bald heads, like, okay, my bald head. So there is a lot to do. There is a lot to do in this organization, and once we start training people, and we kind of touching on different aspects. This is what can happen. This is what can happen. This is what how it looks like. Here is where exactly, if you're getting email, what you need to look at. We're getting to very tactical because the devil is in details, and then you see results of similar tests after 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Usually you see in a year significant reduction on practice behaviors that people, again, it's not a blaming exercise. They just not
It's just been
not being educated
yeah.
on what to do or not to do.
Exactly. And I think we are on time, right? So again, thank you for your time, right? Hopefully today we talked about some basics. These are again basics without breaking the bank. We'll create a guide and we'll send that to you guys as well. So thank you for attending and look forward to the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. And we're going to post this webinar soon as in our website and in our social media. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.